I never saw it coming. If you had told me a year ago that my wife would blindside me with divorce papers and vanish without a trace, I would have laughed in your face. We were solid. No, more than that, we were perfect. The kind of couple people envied. We had our inside jokes, spontaneous weekend getaways, late-night conversations about the meaning of life. She was my best friend, my partner in everything. And then, just like that, she was gone. We'd been married for almost 2 years, together for 5. When I look back now, I wonder if I missed the signs. Did she start pulling away before I noticed? Was I too wrapped up in work, in the day-to-day of our lives, to see the cracks forming? I keep replaying the last few months in my head, searching for the moment everything shifted. At first, it was little things, stuff that didn't seem important on their own, but added up in hindsight. She started locking her phone, which she'd never done before. She became more secretive, brushing off my questions with vague answers. Just work stress, she'd say with a tired smile. Nothing to worry about. She was wrong. There was plenty to worry about. The first real red flag came when she started asking about our finances, specifically my finances. I work in real estate investment. Money has never been a problem for us. She had access to our accounts, a comfortable lifestyle, never had to ask for anything. So why the sudden interest? Why the late-night questions about my savings, my investments, the property we owned? One night, we were in bed, her head resting on my chest, when she casually asked, if something ever happened to you, what would happen to everything? Your accounts, the house, your investments. I remember laughing, brushing it off as one of those weird late-night hypotheticals. I guess it would go to my next of kin. You mostly. She hummed in response, but something about the way she stiffened made my stomach twist. I should have paid attention. A few weeks later, I caught her checking our joint account multiple times a day. At first, I thought she was just being responsible, but then I noticed small, frequent withdrawals, always just under the limit that would require a notification. And then there were the phone calls. Always stepping out of the room, always speaking in hushed tones. It didn't make sense. None of it did. And then, one morning, she handed me an envelope. A manila envelope, the kind lawyers use. I stared at it for a second, still groggy from sleep. What's this? Her expression was unreadable. Just open it. I did. Divorce papers. She didn't even wait for me to speak. I'm sorry, she said, her voice eerily calm. But this is for the best. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The woman I loved, the woman who just last night had kissed me goodnight and whispered how much she adored me, was now sitting across from me, dismantling our life with a few pieces of paper. I don't remember what I said. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. Maybe I just sat there, numb, while she rattled off some rehearsed speech about people growing apart, about how she needed something different. I didn't believe a word of it. Something wasn't right. But I signed the papers. Because what else was I supposed to do? Beg her to stay? Try to hold on to something that was already slipping through my fingers? A week later, she was gone. No trace. No phone calls, no emails. She quit her job, emptied her personal bank account, and vanished. For months, I tried not to care. I focused on work, on rebuilding my life, on forgetting the woman who walked away without a second thought. And then, one night, just as I was finally starting to move on, she came back. Desperate, and begging for my help. She stood on my doorstep, her knuckles still resting against the wood as if she was frozen mid-knock. I hadn't seen her in 7 months. 7 months of silence, of wondering if she'd left the country, if she'd started a new life, if she had ever really loved me in the first place. 7 months of picking up the pieces of a life she shattered with nothing more than a manila envelope and a few empty words. And now, here she was. She looked different. Her hair, always so perfectly styled, was messy and unkempt, strands falling in front of her face like she hadn't brushed it in days. The fitted blouses and tailored skirts she used to wear had been replaced by an oversized hoodie and worn-out jeans. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she had this wild, almost frantic look about her. But none of that hit me as hard as what she said next. I need your help. I stared at her, gripping the doorknob so tightly my knuckles ached. My brain struggled to process what was happening, the sheer audacity of it all. She left me. She walked away, disappeared without a word, and now she was back? Asking for help? I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. You have some nerve showing up here. She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to be angry. Like she thought she could just walk back into my life, and I'd welcome her with open arms. I should have slammed the door in her face. I should have told her to go to hell. But there was something in her eyes. Something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. I sighed, rubbing a hand down my face. What do you want? She hesitated, her gaze flicking past me, as if she was checking to see if I was alone. Can I come in? I almost said no. I should have said no. But against my better judgment, I stepped aside, letting her slip past me into the house she used to call home. She stood there awkwardly, glancing around like she expected everything to be exactly as she left it. But things had changed. The framed photos of us were gone. The furniture had been rearranged. It wasn't our home anymore. It was just mine. I motioned toward the couch. Talk. She sat, gripping her hands together like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. I don't even know where to start. How about where you went? My voice was sharp, laced with months of unanswered questions. How about why you disappeared without telling anyone? Why your friends thought you were dead? Why your family wouldn't even return my calls? She swallowed hard, looking down at her lap. I didn't have a choice. I scoffed. There's always a choice. She shook her head, eyes welling with unshed tears. Not this time. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then she took a deep breath and said the last thing I ever expected to hear. I was running. I frowned. From what? She looked up at me then, and the sheer desperation in her expression sent a chill down my spine. From them. My stomach dropped. What the hell are you talking about? She let out a shaky breath, her fingers trembling against her jeans. I made a mistake. A big one. I got involved with the wrong people. I didn't realize how dangerous they were until it was too late. I just stared at her. This was insane. This wasn't the woman I knew. The woman who had always been calculated, put together, always thinking 5 steps ahead. What people? I demanded. She hesitated. Investors. My blood ran cold. Investors. I worked in real estate. I knew what that word could mean, especially when whispered in the wrong circles. The kind of people who didn't ask twice when they wanted their money back. I had a sinking feeling this wasn't about some bad stock choices. She clenched her jaw. I didn't plan for this, okay? I got in over my head. They were promising double returns, easy money, and she cut herself off, shaking her head. I took a risk. I thought I was being smart. I didn't think they'd come after me. I let out a slow breath, my brain working overtime to process this. How much? She flinched. I leaned forward. How much do you owe them? She swallowed hard. 120,000. I nearly choked. You, what? Her hands gripped the edge of the couch like she was bracing herself for impact. I thought I could fix it before it got out of control. But I kept losing. I tried pulling out before things got worse, but they don't let you do that. And then when they realized I couldn't pay, she trailed off, her breathing uneven. I didn't need her to finish. I already knew how these things worked. My mind was spinning. And you thought what? That you could just come back here and I'd bail you out. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't know where else to go. I shook my head, standing up. Unbelievable. She shot up after me, grabbing my arm. Please. I know I don't deserve it. I know I screwed up, but I'm scared, and I have no one else. I stared at her, at the woman I used to love. The woman who shattered my world, who left without looking back. I should have told her to leave. But I couldn't ignore the fact that she was terrified. And worse, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I should have thrown her out. Every logical part of my brain screamed at me to shut the door, to walk away, to let her deal with the consequences of her own reckless choices. But I didn't. Because no matter how much I hated what she had done, I couldn't ignore the look in her eyes, the sheer, raw terror. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. If she was really this scared, then she wasn't the only one in danger. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Who are they? She wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, her fingers trembling. She hesitated, looking over her shoulder like she expected someone to be standing in the shadows. I can't say their names. It's not just about me. They don't just ruin your life if you owe them. They go after everyone. Family, friends, anyone they think can pay. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Did you mention me? She hesitated a fraction of a second too long. I exhaled sharply. Jesus Christ. I didn't mean to, she rushed out. They asked if I had resources, anyone who could help me settle my debt. I panicked. I told them I didn't, but they must have figured something out. They always do. I ran a hand down my face, my pulse hammering. This was bad. Worse than bad. It wasn't just about her anymore. Have you seen them? Since you came back? I asked. She nodded. I think they've been watching me. I went still. Watching you. She nodded again, her breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. I keep seeing the same black car parked a few houses down. I thought it was just paranoia at first, but then I noticed it was always there when I left the house. And last night, she swallowed hard. Last night, someone knocked on my door. When I looked outside, no one was there. But this morning, there was a note in my mailbox. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled slip of paper. I unfolded it, my stomach twisting as I read the words scribbled in sharp, uneven handwriting. Time's up. We'll be in touch. I clenched my jaw. They know where you are. She nodded, looking sick. I forced myself to think. This wasn't just some financial dispute. These people weren't sending late payment notices. They were making threats. And if they knew where she was, it meant they could find me too. I turned away, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. The rage was building now, not just at her, but at the whole situation. She'd dragged me into this. She'd put my life at risk without a second thought, just like she'd walked away from me without looking back. And yet, despite all of that, despite the fury boiling in my chest, I couldn't ignore the reality. She wasn't lying. She was in real danger. And now, so was I. I turned back to her. Where are you staying? She bit her lip. A motel. I exhaled slowly. You can't go back there. Her eyes widened. You're letting me stay here? Hell no. I grabbed my keys. You're coming with me. We need to figure this out before these people do something worse. She didn't argue. As we left, I glanced at the street. My house was in a quiet neighborhood, but now that I was looking for it, I saw what she meant. A dark sedan was parked near the corner, just far enough to seem casual, but not far enough to be a coincidence. I tightened my grip on the keys. We were running out of time, and I had a bad feeling this was only the beginning. The tension sat thick in the air as I drove. She sat beside me, curled into herself like a kicked dog. I was flicking nervously between the side mirror and the road ahead. I didn't ask where she wanted to go. It didn't matter. She had no plan, no safe place. The only thing that mattered now was figuring out how deep this went before it swallowed us both. I pulled into an underground parking garage downtown, where I knew the security cameras covered every inch of the lot. If we were being followed, I wanted to see it for myself. I killed the engine and turned to face her. Tell me everything. She swallowed hard. I already told you. Not enough. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Names. Details. What exactly did you promise these people? She hesitated, then exhaled, as if resigning herself to the truth. It started after we got married. A cold weight settled in my chest. She kept going, avoiding my gaze. I met someone through a work event. He wasn't a client, just someone in the investment world. He talked big returns, private opportunities, offshore accounts. It was supposed to be low risk, something exclusive that only certain people got access to. She let out a hollow laugh. I felt special, like I was finally playing in the big leagues. I clenched my jaw. You didn't even need money. I know, she whispered, but I wanted more. There it was, the real truth, ugly and selfish. She hadn't been desperate. She had been greedy. She wrung her hands together. At first, I only put in a little, just enough to see if it was real. And it worked. The returns were huge. Too good to be true. I let out a slow breath. And then, her lips trembled. Then I got cocky. I started reinvesting. Bigger and bigger amounts. When we argued about money, about me suddenly asking all those questions, I was already in deep. My stomach twisted as I remembered the conversations, the casual questions about my savings, the curiosity about inheritance laws, the way she started monitoring our accounts. I thought she was planning to leave. And maybe she was. But now I realized she had been preparing for something much worse. Then it all crashed, she whispered. Everything. The money disappeared overnight. The people I invested with vanished. And the men who loaned me money to get in? They didn't vanish. They came knocking. A slow rage built in my chest. How much did you borrow? She hesitated. Don't lie to me. She squeezed her eyes shut. 80,000. I nearly put my fist through the dashboard. You took out an $80,000 loan from criminals? I thought I could fix it before it got out of control, she said weakly. And then you ran. She flinched. I didn't know what else to do. Coward. She had run instead of facing the consequences. Instead of asking for help. Instead of telling the truth. She had disappeared, left everyone behind, including me. And now she was back, bringing her problems to my doorstep like they were mine to fix. I gripped the steering wheel, fighting the urge to scream. Why me? I asked finally, voice raw. Why come back now? Her breath hitched. Because they think you're my way out. They think you'll pay. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I turned my head slowly, eyes locking onto hers. You told them I would. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I let out a bitter laugh. Jesus Christ. You made me the payday. Her hands trembled. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to? I snapped. So what was the plan? Show up, cry, let me play hero while you walk away clean. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't know what else to do. The worst part was, I believed her. She had no backup plan. No safety net. She had walked herself into a nightmare, and now she was trying to pull me in with her. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. You said they've been watching you. Have they made contact? She nodded, rubbing her arms like she was suddenly freezing. They sent someone to my motel 2 nights ago. He didn't say much. Just left a photo of me on my bed while I was out. A close-up, like he took it from a distance. I stiffened. She took a shaking breath. And yesterday, I got a text. She reached for her phone, unlocking it and sliding it toward me. I looked down. The message was short. Cold. We see you. And underneath it, an image. A grainy, zoomed-in shot of her standing outside a grocery store. My blood ran ice cold. This wasn't just intimidation. This was a warning. I inhaled sharply and tossed her phone onto the dashboard. You're not going back to that motel. She swallowed hard. Then where do I go? I pulled my own phone out, opening my contacts. You're going to stay somewhere safe. And we're going to handle this before it gets worse. Because if these people thought I was their golden ticket, then I needed to change the game before they made their next move. I made the call. It wasn't to the cops. They couldn't do anything. Not with people like this. Not with the kind of money involved. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Liam. A pause on the other end. Then a low chuckle. Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. Yeah, well, things change. I glanced at my ex, who was hugging herself in the passenger seat, staring blankly at the dashboard. I need a favor. Another pause. Then, where are you? I gave him the location. 20 minutes later, we pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind a bar that had no name, no signs, just an old neon light flickering above the door. It wasn't a place you found by accident. Liam was already waiting, leaning against the hood of his black SUV, smoking a cigarette. He looked the same, shaggy hair, sharp eyes, the kind of guy who never fully left the shadows. My ex stiffened when she saw him. Who is he? The only person I know who deals with people like the ones after you. She swallowed hard but didn't argue. I parked, got out, and walked toward Liam. He crushed the cigarette under his boot and gave me a once-over. You look like shit. Been a long week. He nodded at the car. Better. Yeah, she looks worse. She's got bigger problems than a bad hair day. Liam smirked but didn't push. He always knew when to shut up. That's why I called him. I cut straight to it. She's in deep with some bad people. Loan sharks, offshore investments, the whole mess. Liam sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. And let me guess, they think you'll be the one to clean it up. I nodded. He let out a low whistle. They got balls. That's the problem. I don't think they just want money. I pulled out my phone, showed him the text. They're watching her. Which means they're watching me too. Liam studied the screen, his expression darkening. This ain't just debt collection. They're testing you. I frowned. Testing me. They want to see what you'll do. If you panic, if you pay up, if you run. They're picking their next move based on your reaction. He glanced toward my car, where my ex was still sitting motionless. How much does she owe? 120 grand. Liam whistled. Damn. They must have liked her. She borrowed 80. His smirk vanished. Then where's the rest from? I turned back to my ex. She looked away. Liam's eyes narrowed. She's lying. No, I slammed the car door open. What aren't you telling me? She shrank back. I didn't think it mattered. What? My voice was dangerously low. She swallowed hard. It's not just the loan. They had me move money for them. Liam swore under his breath. I just stared at her, my entire body going cold. You laundered money for them. She flinched at the word, but she didn't deny it. Liam shook his head. Shit. That changes everything. I clenched my jaw. Start talking. Now. Her hands twisted in her lap. At first, I didn't even realize what I was doing. They said they needed a safe way to transfer funds, and she swallowed. I let them move money through my accounts. They made it look legitimate. I thought I was just investing, But when the markets crashed, they told me I was on the hook. I exhaled slowly, trying to contain the fury burning in my chest. And you didn't think that mattered? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know how bad it was. I thought if I ran, they'd just forget about me. Liam let out a bitter laugh. Forget about 120 grand? Lady, these guys don't even forget a bar tab. She wiped at her face, breathing hard. I thought I could fix it. But then they started following me, leaving notes. And when I came back, they knew. Of course they knew. These weren't just criminals, they were professionals. And now they had both of us in their sights. I looked at Liam. What's the play here? He considered for a moment. You got two choices. Pay them off, which, let's be real, won't be the end of it. Or make them back off another way. I exhaled. And that means... Liam smiled grimly. We make them think they're being watched too. I raised an eyebrow. He tapped the side of his SUV. I've got people. Friends and places even these guys don't want to mess with. If we make them believe you've got muscle behind you, they'll think twice about pushing harder. But we have to move fast. I turned back to my ex. You sure they don't know you're with me? She hesitated. I don't think so. Liam sighed. Not good enough. We have to assume they do. He looked at me. You up for this? I thought about walking away. About letting her deal with this on her own. But the truth was, if I did nothing, they wouldn't just stop with her. I nodded. Yeah, let's do it. Liam grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. Then let's remind them that they're not the only ones watching. As we drove off, I could feel it, the shift in the air. This wasn't just about her anymore. Now, it was a game, and I wasn't about to lose. The next 48 hours were a blur of careful planning, tension, and the kind of paranoia I never thought I'd experience outside of a bad crime thriller. Liam moved fast. By the time we left that parking lot, he had already put things into motion. You're gonna stay somewhere safe, he told my ex as we drove. Someplace they don't know about. She hugged herself, looking small. Where? Liam smirked. I got a friend. Owns a cabin up north, off-grid, no internet, no cell service. You'll be a ghost. Her breath hitched. For how long? As long as it takes, I answered, not even looking at her. Until this is handled. I could feel her staring at me, but I didn't care. She had no right to expect kindness from me. Not after everything. The only reason I was doing this was because if these people thought she was my weakness, then walking away wasn't an option. Liam called his guy. A few hours later, we had her stashed in the middle of nowhere with a prepaid phone, enough supplies to last her a few weeks, and strict instructions not to talk to anyone but me or Liam. Then it was time to deal with the real problem, the men who were watching. And we were about to let them know we saw them too. Liam's people weren't the kind of guys you found on LinkedIn. They didn't wear suits or sit in fancy offices. These were ex-military, ex-cops, guys who had spent years in the shadows of society. And right now, they were exactly what I needed. We're gonna make them uncomfortable, Liam explained as we sat in his apartment, which, unsurprisingly, looked more like a surveillance bunker than a home. A dozen monitors displayed live feeds of different locations. Some of them were ours, cameras his guys had planted near my house, my work, and most importantly, around my ex's motel before she left. Others were theirs, hidden cameras tracking the people tailing me. The black sedan had been seen at least 5 times, circling different locations. They weren't being subtle anymore. They were waiting. Testing me. Liam pointed at one of the screens, where a grainy image showed a man stepping out of the sedan. He was tall, built like someone who could break a man's ribs with one punch, but the way he moved was too smooth for a street thug. These guys aren't amateurs, Liam muttered. They're organized. Probably hired muscle. Can we ID them? We already did. Liam tapped on the screen, pulling up a file. Name's Victor Malenko. Ex-private security. Works freelance now, mostly for people who don't like to be found. I clenched my jaw. So they're serious. Oh, they're serious. Liam turned to me. But so are we. That night, we turned the tables. Liam's guys followed them. Tailed their car. Watched them watching me. And then we made our first move. Victor and his crew were parked outside my office the next day when one of Liam's guys, a 6'4", ex-Marine with a nasty scar down his cheek, walked right up to their car and knocked on the window. They didn't roll it down. They just stared at him. But he just smiled, real slow, and took a picture of them. Then he walked away. That same night, a black SUV idled outside their motel. Did nothing. Just sat there for hours. Watching. The message was clear. We see you too. The shift happened fast. The next morning, the black sedan wasn't outside my house. By the afternoon, it wasn't at my office either. By nightfall, they were gone. No calls. No texts. No notes in the mailbox. Liam smirked when I told him. Told you. They were testing you. They wanted to know if you were an easy mark. But we flipped it. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. So, what now? Now. Liam stretched. We wait. That was the worst part. Waiting. Wondering if they would come back. But they didn't. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. And nothing. No signs of them. No threats. Just silence. It was over. Or at least, I wanted to believe it was. I drove up to the cabin after 2 weeks. She was waiting when I got there, looking thinner, paler, her eyes hollow. Is it done? She asked, voice small. I nodded. They're gone. She let out a shaky breath, collapsing onto the porch steps. I don't know how to thank you. You don't. She looked up at me then, her lip trembling. I never wanted this to happen. I just made a mistake. I stared at her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. No. You made a choice. Her face crumpled. I sighed, looking out at the trees. You need to disappear for real this time. Change your name. Move far away. Don't leave a trail. She swallowed hard. And you? I looked her dead in the eye. I never want to see you again. She flinched like I had slapped her. But she didn't argue. She knew she had burned every bridge left. I got back in my car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. Life went on. I rebuilt. I healed. I learned to breathe again without waiting for the next blow. And eventually, I moved on. I met someone kind, someone real. Someone who didn't see me as a payday or an escape route. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy. Then, months later, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. Just a few lines scribbled in familiar handwriting. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're happy. I read it once. Then I burned it. Because I was happy. And she was just another ghost from a past I refused to carry.